The bitter January wind howled through the bare oak trees as Emma Blackwood clutched her small cloth suitcase to her chest. At just 11 years old, she stood before Willow Creek Orphanage, a three-story Victorian mansion whose weathered exterior seemed to match the gray Massachusetts sky. Snowflakes clung to her chestnut hair as Mrs. Holloway, the stern-faced head mistress, ushered her inside with a firm grip on her shoulder. "You'll be sharing a room on the third floor, Mrs." Holloway stated flatly. "The other girls will show you the rules. Breakfast is at 6, not a minute later." Emma nodded silently, her eyes taking in the faded wallpaper and creaking floorboards. The orphanage smelled of pine soap and old wood, with an undercurrent of something she couldn't quite place. Perhaps sadness itself had a scent after all. After the typhoid epidemic had taken both her parents within a week of each other, there had been no relatives to claim her. The family savings had barely covered the funeral expenses, leaving Emma with nothing but her mother's silver locket and a few pieces of clothing. The third floor was colder than the rest of the house. 5 iron beds lined the wall of the dormitory, each with a small trunk at its foot. 4 girls, ranging from 9 to 13, looked up as Emma entered. "That's yours," said a tall, thin girl named Martha, pointing to the bed furthest from the coal stove. "You'll want to keep your things locked in your trunk." Things have a way of disappearing around here that night. As the other girls slept, Emma lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the old house. The wind whispered through cracks in the window frames, and somewhere above her, in what must have been the attic, she heard a rhythmic creaking, as if someone were pacing back and forth, in perfect cadence. She pulled her thin blanket tighter, telling herself it was just the house settling. But houses didn't settle in such a deliberate pattern. Houses didn't move with purpose. Emma closed her eyes, but the pacing continued until dawn broke, when it finally mercifully ceased. Morning brought routine and chores, endless chores. Emma's hands grew red and raw from scrubbing floors, washing laundry, and peeling potatoes. The other girls spoke little during their tasks, their eyes downcast, their movements mechanical. "Does anyone use the attic?" Emma whispered to Martha as they folded sheets. Martha's hands froze mid-fold. "We don't talk about the attic," she replied, her voice barely audible. "And if you're smart, you won't go up there either." That evening, as Emma placed her few belongings in her trunk, she noticed a small door near the ceiling in the corner of the dormitory, a door that must lead to the attic stairs. And as darkness fell, the pacing began again, more insistent than before. Emma watched as the other girls pulled their pillows over their ears, a practiced gesture that told her they'd been hearing it for far longer than she had. A week had passed since Emma's arrival at Willow Creek Orphanage, and winter had tightened its grip on the Massachusetts countryside. Frost patterns like skeletal fingers spread across the windows, and the pipes groaned in protest against the cold. Emma had fallen into the relentless rhythm of orphanage life-wake, work, eat meager portions, work more, sleep, repeat, but she had not grown accustomed to the nightly pacing from the attic. While the other girls seemed resigned to it, Emma found herself drawn to the mystery. During her chores, she began to collect snippets of the orphanage's history from the older residents and staff. The building had once belonged to Judge Ezekiel Harrington, a wealthy but reclusive man who died in 1869. The county had purchased the property for the orphanage shortly after his death, converting the family home into an institution for parentless children. "The judge wasn't right in the head toward the end," whispered Cook, an elderly woman who had worked in the house even before it became an orphanage. "Lost his wife and son to scarlet fever in 67. Never was the same after." Emma had been assigned to help in the kitchen that day, peeling endless potatoes for the evening's thin stew. "Did he have other children?" she asked, keeping her voice low so Mrs. Holloway wouldn't hear them conversing. Cook's wrinkled hands paused over the pot she was stirring. "There was a daughter, strange little thing. Disappeared not long before the judge passed. Some say she ran away, but double quotes, she trailed off, making the sign of the cross over her chest." That night, as the pacing above commenced with its usual precision, Emma found herself unable to simply lie there and listen. While the other girls slept, Tor pretended too, she slipped from her bed, her bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. The small door in the corner had no lock, only a simple latch that lifted with a soft click. Behind it was a narrow staircase, steep and unwelcoming. No candle or lamp was at hand, so Emma relied on the faint moonlight filtering through a small window on the landing. The stairs creaked beneath her weight, each sound seeming to echo through the sleeping house. The attic was vast and cluttered with the remnants of the judge's life, furniture draped in sheets like ghosts, trunks bound with leather straps, paintings turned to face the wall. The air was thick with dust and the peculiar stillness that settles in spaces long undisturbed. Yet the pacing Emma had heard every night was absent now that she stood in the very room from which it emanated. A child's rocking horse sat in the corner, its painted smile eerie in the dim light. Beside it was a small desk, sized for a child, with a leather-bound journal resting upon it. Emma approached cautiously, drawn by curiosity stronger than fear. The journal's pages were filled with a child's handwriting, a girl's, judging by the careful penmanship. The entries dated back to 1867, the year Cook had mentioned the judge's wife and son had died. As Emma's fingers brushed the yellowed pages, a cold breath of air caressed the back of her neck. She whirled around, but the attic remained empty. Yet when she turned back to the journal, it had fallen open to a page dated October 31st, 1868. Father locks me in the attic now. He says I'm too much like Mother, that it pains him to look at me. I pace to keep warm at night. 30 steps one way, 30 steps back. I count each one. It's the only way to mark time when the darkness seems endless. The words seemed to whisper off the page, and as Emma read them, she could have sworn she heard them spoken aloud. A girl's voice, soft and sad, just behind her ear. Will you be my friend? No one comes to visit me anymore. Emma spun around again, heart pounding, but saw only shadows. Clutching the journal to her chest, she fled back down the stairs, securing the latch behind her with trembling fingers. That night the pacing stopped for the first time since her arrival, replaced by something far more unsettling, the sound of a child softly weeping. February arrived with a blizzard that sealed Willow Creek Orphanage behind walls of snow. The children were confined indoors, the cold air seeping through every crack in the old mansion. Emma had not returned to the attic since her discovery of the journal, but its contents haunted her thoughts. Each night the weeping continued, sometimes accompanied by whispers too faint to decipher. The other girls in the dormitory had noticed the change. "What did you do?" Martha demanded one morning, dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. "It never cried before you came. It just walked." "I don't know what you mean," Emma replied, avoiding Martha's accusing gaze. "Don't play dumb," Martha hissed. "We all know you went up there. Now it's different. Now it's angry." Emma wanted to protest that the voice she'd heard hadn't sounded angry, just desperately sad and lonely, but she kept silent. Instead, she resolved to learn more about the judge's daughter. Mrs. Holloway kept all the orphanage records in a small office on the first floor. While the headmistress was occupied supervising the younger children, Emma slipped inside, ostensibly to deliver clean linens, but actually to search for information. The filing cabinet contained records of all the children who had passed through Willow Creek's doors. But Emma was looking for something older. In the bottom drawer she found a folder labeled Property Acquisition -1869. Inside were the documents from when the county purchased the mansion, including an inventory of its contents and a newspaper clipping about Judge Harrington's death. "Prominent judge found dead in home," read the headline. The article described how Judge Ezekiel Harrington had been discovered in his study, apparently having suffered a heart attack. It mentioned his previous losses, his wife Catherine and son Thomas, to scarlet fever, but made no reference to a daughter. As Emma replaced the folder, her eye caught another labeled incidents -1868. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a report from the local sheriff about a search conducted at the Harrington estate in November 1868. The judge had reported his 12-year-old daughter Lillian missing, claiming she had run away. The search had yielded no results, and the case was eventually closed. Emma's hands trembled as she returned the document to its folder. Lillian Harrington had disappeared just days after the journal entry Emma had read in the attic. That night, as the other girls slept fitfully through the sound of weeping, Emma made a decision. She crept once more up the attic stairs, this time carrying a candle and matches she had pilfered from the kitchen. The small flame cast long shadows across the cluttered space. Emma moved toward the child's desk where she had found the journal. "Lillian?" she whispered into the darkness. "My name is Emma. I found your journal. I'd like to be your friend." The candle flame wavered, though there was no draft. From the deepest corner of the attic came a sound like a sigh, and then words, soft but distinct. "He didn't want me anymore after they died. He said I reminded him too much of Mother." Emma's breath caught in her throat as she saw a faint outline begin to take shape near the rocking horse. Not a full apparition, but a suggestion of a form, like fog curling into the silhouette of a small girl. "What happened to you, Lillian?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible. The temperature in the attic plummeted, and Emma's candle flickered dangerously low. The outline seemed to drift toward her, and words whispered directly into her ear. "Look behind the wall where the rain leaks through. He put me there. Said it was for my own good." The candle went out, plunging Emma into total darkness. She fumbled for the matches, but her trembling hands dropped them to the floor. Panic rising, she groped her way back to the stairs and fled to the relative safety of her bed, where she lay awake until dawn, the words echoing in her mind. For 3 days after her encounter in the attic, Emma avoided the third floor as much as possible, volunteering for extra kitchen duties to stay near the warmth of the stoves. But Lillian's words haunted her. Look behind the wall where the rain leaks through. Emma knew exactly which wall to go, for she could no longer deny that's what Lillian had meant. In the northeast corner of the attic, a dark water stain spread like a disease down the wallpaper. Even in the depths of winter, that section always seemed damp, as if the house itself were weeping from that spot. On the fourth day, a brief thaw allowed the orphans 30 minutes of fresh air in the yard. Emma used the opportunity to question Cook further. Was there ever any construction done in the attic? After the judge's daughter disappeared, she asked, helping the old woman carry firewood. Cook gave her a sharp look. Why are you so interested in that old tragedy, child? Best to let sleeping dogs lie. Please, Emma pressed. I need to know. Cook sighed, her breath visible in the cold air. The judge hired men to repair the roof that December. Said there was a leak in the northeast corner. Paid them extra to work through Christmas. She paused, her roomy eyes distant with memory. The strange thing was, come spring, the same spot was leaking again. No matter how many times it was fixed, that corner always wept when it rained. That night, Emma waited until the orphanage was silent save for Lillian's weeping. She crept up to the attic once more, this time bringing a small kitchen knife she'd hidden in her apron pocket. The weeping grew louder as she approached the stained wall. I'm here to help you, Lillian, Emma whispered, running her fingers over the damp wallpaper. Tell me what to do. The weeping stopped abruptly. He built a false wall, came Lillian's voice, seeming to emanate from the stain itself. I was sick. He said I had the fever like Mother and Thomas. He said he couldn't lose me too, that he had to protect me from the world. He gave me medicine that made me sleep, and when I woke, the voice trailed off into a sob. Emma examined the wall more closely. The baseboard where it met the floor seemed newer than those in the rest of the attic, the wood a slightly different shade. She pried at it with the knife until it came loose, revealing a small gap between the visible wall and another behind it. Heart pounding, Emma worked at the wallpaper, tearing it away in strips. Beneath it was a wall of newer plaster. She scraped at it with the knife, but made little progress on the hard surface. I'll come back, she promised Lillian. I'll find a way to open the wall. I'll help people find you. As February turned to March, Emma carefully gathered tools, a hammer lifted from the groundskeeper's shed, a chisel borrowed from the maintenance closet. She hid them beneath a loose floorboard under her bed, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during the first major spring storm. Thunder rattled the windows of Willow Creek Orphanage, and rain lashed against the roof. The perfect cover for the noise Emma would make. While lightning illuminated the attic in brief, ghostly flashes, Emma attacked the false wall. The plaster crumbled under her determined assault, revealing a narrow space behind a space just wide enough for a small body. The smell hit her first, a sweet, sickly odor that had been contained for years behind the wall. Then, as lightning flashed again, Emma saw her, or what remained of her. A child's skeleton clothed in the tattered remains of a once fine dress. A silver locket still hanging around the delicate neck bones. Emma stumbled backward, dropping the hammer with a thud that was lost in a crash of thunder. Lillian's remains had been walled up alive, a victim not of running away, but of a father's madness. As Emma stared in horror, the air around the skeleton seemed to shimmer, and for just a moment, she saw Lillian as she must have been in life, a pale girl with long dark hair and solemn eyes, wearing a blue dress with lace collar. Thank you, the apparition whispered, a sad smile touching her translucent lips. Now they'll know. Now I can rest. The discovery of Lillian Harrington's remains behind the attic wall threw Willow Creek Orphanage into chaos. Sheriff Miller, a burly man with a gray-streaked beard, arrived with 2 deputies the morning after Emma's revelation. The children were gathered in the dining hall while the authorities examined the attic. Emma sat alone at the end of a long table, aware of the suspicious glances from Mrs. Holloway and the fearful ones from her fellow orphans. She had told the adults a partial truth, that she'd been curious about the leak in the attic and had discovered the false wall. She omitted any mention of Lillian's ghost or the journal, which she had hidden beneath her mattress. Sheriff Miller eventually came to question her, pulling up a chair and sitting with his hat in his hands. His eyes were kind but shrewd, missing nothing. That's quite a discovery you made, Miss Blackwood, he said. Mind telling me what you were doing in the attic in the middle of a thunderstorm? Emma swallowed hard. I couldn't sleep because of the storm, sir. I'd noticed the leak before, and I was worried it might get worse and damage the ceiling in our dormitory. The sheriff nodded slowly, clearly not entirely convinced. "And what made you take a hammer and chisel to the wall?" "It looked newer than the rest," Emma replied truthfully, "and there was something wrong about it. I can't explain it better than that, sir." Sheriff Miller studied her face for a long moment. "You know, the judge was a powerful man in these parts. Even after all these years, there are folks who won't want this story coming out." He leaned closer. "Are you sure there isn't anything else you want to tell me? Anything that might have led you to that specific spot?" Emma hesitated, torn between telling the whole truth and protecting herself from being labeled insane. "I had dreams," she finally said. "Dreams about a girl crying behind a wall. It sounds foolish, I know." To her surprise, the sheriff didn't laugh. "My grandmother used to say that sometimes the dead find ways to speak to those willing to listen." He patted her hand awkwardly. "You did the right thing, regardless of what led you there." In the days that followed, the orphanage became the center of a historical investigation. Records were examined, and elderly residents of the town who remembered Judge Harrington were interviewed. The official story that emerged was that the judge, grief-stricken after losing his wife and son, had hidden his daughter's illness from the town. When she died, presumably from the same scarlet fever, his mind had broken, and he had concealed her death in a misguided attempt to protect her from the indignity of burial. But Emma knew the truth was darker. Lillian's journal, which she continued to keep hidden, told of a father who had grown increasingly controlling and paranoid after the deaths of his wife and son. He had kept Lillian isolated, convinced that the outside world was full of disease and danger. When she had attempted to run away in October 1868, he had locked her in the attic. The final entries suggested he had indeed given her medicine laudanum she had written, but not to treat fever, rather to keep her compliant as he built her living tomb. The story spread throughout Massachusetts and beyond. Newspapers from Boston sent reporters to cover the macabre discovery, and crowds of curiosity seekers gathered outside the orphanage gates. Mrs. Holloway kept the children indoors and away from windows, but the atmosphere within the house had changed irrevocably. At night, Emma noticed that the weeping had stopped. The attic above was silent for the first time since her arrival. But she couldn't shake the feeling that while Lillian's secret had been revealed, something about the story remained unfinished. April brought green buds to the trees surrounding Willow Creek Orphanage, but inside its walls, a pall remained. The discovery of Lillian's remains had tarnished the institution's already meager reputation. Potential adoptive parents, always scarce, now avoided the place entirely, unnerved by its grim history. Emma had become a pariah among the other children. They whispered that she was cursed or possessed, that she spoke with the dead. Even Martha, who had initially seemed the most approachable of the girls, now made the sign of the cross whenever Emma entered the room. Mrs. Holloway watched her with cold suspicion. "Unnatural curiosity leads to unnatural discoveries," she had said when she caught Emma alone in the hallway. "You would do well to remember that." The only person who treated Emma with any kindness was Cook, who sometimes slipped her extra portions at meals and defended her against the more vicious whispers of the staff. "They fear what they don't understand," Cook told her one evening as Emma helped wash dishes. "And they don't understand how a child could uncover what had been hidden for so long." Emma had been turning something over in her mind for weeks. The locket that was found with Lillian, what happened to it? Cook glanced around to ensure they were alone. Sheriff Miller took it as evidence. "I heard him say it contained a miniature portrait of Lillian's mother." That night, Emma took out Lillian's journal from its hiding place. She had read it cover to cover multiple times, looking for something, anything that might explain why she still felt Lillian's presence even though the weeping had stopped. An entry from September 1868 caught her attention again. "Mother's locket is my most precious possession. She told me before she died that as long as I wear it, a part of her will always be with me. Inside is her portrait on one side and a lock of her hair on the other. Father tried to take it once, saying the memories were too painful, but I hid it beneath the floorboard in my room. I only take it out at night when he's asleep." Emma closed the journal, a chill running down her spine despite the spring warmth. If Lillian had cherished the locket so deeply, could her spirit still be bound to it? Was that why, even with her remains discovered, something still felt unresolved? The next day, Emma approached Sheriff Miller when he came to the orphanage to conclude some final details of the investigation. "Sir," she said, catching him as he was leaving Mrs. Holloway's office, "may I ask what will happen to Lillian's locket?" The sheriff seemed surprised by the question. "It's being held with the other evidence for now. Eventually, since there are no living relatives, it will probably end up in county storage." "Couldn't she be buried with it?" Emma asked. "It was her mother's. It meant everything to her." Sheriff Miller's expression softened. "That's a thoughtful suggestion, Miss Blackwood. I'll see what I can do." He hesitated, then added, "The county's arranged for a proper burial for Lillian next week. Small affair, just the Reverend saying words. Would you like to attend? Seems fitting since you're the one who found her." Emma nodded gratefully. The burial took place on a Wednesday afternoon in the small cemetery behind the town church. Emma was the only child present, standing apart from the handful of officials and townspeople who had come out of duty or curiosity. "Reverend." Thomas spoke briefly about the tragedy of a young life cut short and the peace that comes with proper Christian burial. As the small coffin was lowered into the ground, Emma noticed Sheriff Miller approach the Reverend and hand him something small and silver, the locket. The Reverend nodded and placed it atop the coffin before the first shovelful of earth was thrown. That night, Emma lay awake in her bed, listening to the new familiar sounds of the orphanage, the settling of old wood, the distant clanking of pipes, the soft breathing of the other girls. But the attic above remained silent. No pacing, no weeping, no whispers. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, a cool breeze seemed to pass through the room, though the windows were closed against the spring night. Emma opened her eyes to see a faint shimmer at the foot of her bed, the translucent outline of a girl in a blue dress. "Thank you," Lillian whispered, her voice like the rustle of leaves. "I can go to Mother now." The shimmer grew fainter, and then vanished entirely, leaving only the moonlight streaming through the window and a sense of peace Emma hadn't felt since before her parents' deaths. May arrived with warming temperatures and the promise of summer, but for Emma, life at Willow Creek Orphanage remained cold and isolated. The notoriety of her discovery had not faded. If anything, it had grown into local legend. Children from the town would dare each other to approach the orphanage fence, calling out for the ghost girl, sometimes meaning Lillian, sometimes meaning Emma herself. Mrs. Holloway had grown increasingly hostile, assigning Emma the most unpleasant chores and punishing her for infractions real and imagined. "You've brought shame to this institution," she had declared after catching Emma looking out the window at the taunting town children. "Your presence here is a reminder of a history best forgotten." Emma endured in silence, finding solace in the knowledge that she had helped Lillian find peace. Though the ghost no longer appeared to her, Emma sometimes felt a comforting presence when she was alone, as if someone were watching over her. One rainy afternoon, while scrubbing the entrance hall floor as punishment for a supposedly inadequate job cleaning the dining room, Emma overheard a conversation between Mrs. Holloway and a visitor, an elderly man in an expensive suit. "The county is considering selling the property, Mrs. Holloway," the man was saying. "The scandal has made it unsuitable as an orphanage. Of course, alternative arrangements would be made for the children." "I understand, Mr. Whitmore," Mrs. Holloway replied. "When might this occur?" "The decision will be finalized next month. We'd begin relocating the children immediately after." Emma's heart raced. Relocation could mean anything, a different orphanage. Perhaps one even worse than Willow Creek. Or being sent out as unpaid labor to farms or factories. A fate that had befallen other orphans she had known. That night, unable to sleep, Emma found herself drawn once more to the attic. Though Lillian was gone, the space still held secrets. Perhaps secrets that could help Emma determine her own fate. The attic was different now. The northeast corner had been completely opened up during the investigation, the false wall torn away entirely. Lillian's prison was exposed, a narrow space just large enough for a child to stand in, with scratch marks still visible on the inner walls where she had tried to escape. Emma turned away from the grim sight, focusing instead on the other contents of the attic. Most of Judge Harrington's personal effects had been cataloged and removed by the sheriff's office, but furniture and trunks of lesser importance remained. A large roll-top desk caught Emma's attention. It stood against the far wall, its surface covered in dust except for finger marks where investigators had examined it. Emma approached it cautiously, pulling open drawers that had already been searched and emptied. The bottom drawer stuck slightly. Emma tugged harder, and it came free with a scraping sound, revealing nothing but dust and a few dead insects. But something about the drawer seemed off. It was shallower than it should have been. Emma ran her fingers along the inside, pressing against the bottom until she felt a section give way, a false bottom. She pried it up with her fingernails to reveal a hidden compartment beneath, containing a single leather-bound book. Unlike Lillian's journal, this book was larger and more formal, a ledger of some kind. Emma opened it carefully, revealing page after page of neat handwriting, dates, and numbers. It was Judge Harrington's private financial record, documenting transactions that had never appeared in the official estate inventory. As Emma flipped through the pages, a pattern emerged. The judge had been embezzling money from the county for years, skimming from public works projects and tax collections. The most recent entries, dated just before his death, showed massive withdrawals, the equivalent of a fortune in today's terms, with no explanation of where the money had gone. The final page contained a hand-drawn map of the Willow Creek property, with an X marked beneath what appeared to be the judge's study on the first floor, now Mrs. Holloway's office. Emma closed the ledger, her mind racing. If the judge had hidden his ill-gotten gains somewhere in the house, and if she could find it before the property was sold, the possibilities were dizzying. Not just escape from another orphanage, but perhaps a chance at a real future education, independence, a life of her own choosing. Dawn was breaking as Emma carefully replaced the ledger in its hiding place. She would need time to figure out how to search the study without being caught, and she would need to be careful. If the fortune was real, others would certainly want to claim it for themselves. As she descended the attic stairs, Emma felt a now familiar cool breeze brush past her. Though Lillian was at peace, perhaps some part of her remained, watching, helping, guiding Emma toward a chance at the freedom they had both been denied. The following week passed in agonizing slowness as Emma sought an opportunity to search Mrs. Holloway's office. The headmistress guarded her domain jealously, keeping the door locked whenever she was absent and rarely leaving during daylight hours. Emma's chance came unexpectedly on a Sunday afternoon in late May. Reverend Thomas had invited Mrs. Holloway to tea after church services, an invitation the status-conscious headmistress could hardly decline. With most of the staff enjoying their day off and the other children playing in the yard under the supervision of Martha, who had been appointed junior monitor, the main floor of the orphanage was deserted. Emma slipped downstairs with a feather duster, the perfect alibi if anyone questioned her presence. The key to Mrs. Holloway's office posed the first challenge, but Emma had prepared for this. Over several days she had collected candle wax on a scrap of cloth, pressing it against the key when Mrs. Holloway had left it unattended on her desk during meals. Using this crude impression and a hairpin bent to the appropriate shape, Emma created a rudimentary key. It took several tense minutes of jiggling the makeshift key before the lock finally turned. Emma entered quickly, closing the door behind her. The office was meticulously organized, with everything in its proper place, books aligned precisely on shelves, papers stacked neatly on the desk, pens arranged in perfect parallel. According to the judge's map, the treasure should be beneath the floor, approximately 2 feet from the east wall. Emma knelt down, running her fingers over the floorboards. The wood here was different from the rest of the house, newer oak rather than the original pine, suggesting it had been replaced at some point. One board felt slightly loose under her touch. Heart-pounding, Emma pried at it with her hairpin until she could grip the edge with her fingers. The board came up with surprising ease, revealing a small hollow beneath. Inside was a metal strongbox, its surface etched with an ornate H. Emma lifted it out with trembling hands. It was heavy, too heavy to be empty, but not so heavy that she couldn't carry it. The box was locked, with no key in sight. Footsteps in the hallway sent a jolt of panic through Emma. Hastily, she replaced the floorboard and shoved the strongbox under the desk, grabbing her feather duster just as the door opened. Cook stood in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of Emma. "Child, what are you doing in here?" "If Mrs. Holloway catches you, I was just dusting," Emma said quickly. "Mrs. Holloway asked me to before she left." The lie felt bitter on her tongue, especially to Cook, who had shown her nothing but kindness. Cook's expression suggested she didn't believe the explanation for a second, but she merely nodded. "Well, you'd best finish quickly. She'll be back within the hour." Emma waited until Cook's footsteps receded before retrieving the strongbox. She couldn't open it here. She needed time and privacy. Tucking it under her apron, she slipped out of the office, locking the door behind her, and hurried up to the 3rd floor. The dormitory was empty, but offered no good hiding places. On impulse, Emma continued up to the attic. Since the investigation, no one ventured there willingly, the perfect place to examine her find. In the far corner of the attic, behind a stack of trunks, Emma settled cross-legged on the floor with the strongbox before her. The lock was old but sturdy, designed to resist tampering. After several failed attempts with her hairpin, Emma resorted to more direct methods. She found a discarded fireplace poker among the attic's jumble and, using it as a lever, pried at the lock until it finally gave way with a loud crack. Inside the box lay bundles of banknotes, more money than Emma had ever seen, along with several small velvet pouches. Opening one, she gasped at the gleam of gold coins. Another contained jewelry, rings, necklaces, and brooches that must have belonged to the judge's wife. But what caught Emma's attention most was a thick envelope addressed to my daughter Lillian, to be opened upon my death. The seal was unbroken. With trembling fingers, Emma opened it, revealing several pages of the judge's distinctive handwriting. The letter began as a confession, admitting to years of corruption and theft, but quickly descended into the ramblings of a disturbed mind. Judge Harrington wrote of his conviction that scarlet fever was not what had killed his wife and son, but rather a curse placed on the family by enemies he had made during his career. He believed Lillian would be the next victim, and that the only way to protect her was to isolate her completely. "I have prepared a safe place for you, my child," he wrote. "A space where no disease, no curse, no evil can reach you. You may find it confining at first, but in time you will understand that my actions were born of the deepest love." The final paragraphs detailed the fortune he had amassed, money meant to provide for Lillian once the danger had passed, instructions for claiming it legally through a lawyer in Boston. The judge had created documents that would give Lillian full control of his estate upon his death, bypassing any official inquiries into its source. Emma sat back, stunned by the implications. The judge hadn't merely been cruel or controlling, he had been truly insane, convinced he was saving his daughter even as he condemned her to a slow death. A sound from the stairwell made Emma freeze. Someone was coming up to the attic. Quickly, she shoved the letter back into the strongbox and pushed it behind the trunks, just as Mrs. Holloway's imposing figure appeared at the top of the stairs. "So," the headmistress said coldly, "this is where you hide to avoid your duties." Emma stood, her mind racing. "I was just looking for some old cloth for mending," she improvised, gesturing vaguely toward the piles of forgotten items. Mrs. Holloway's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Cook mentioned finding you in my office earlier. Care to explain that as well?" "I was dusting, ma'am," Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "The Sunday chore rotation. Do not lie to me, child," Mrs. Holloway interrupted, advancing into the attic. "Sunday chores do not include my office, as you well know. First you disturb the dead with your meddling, and now you invade private spaces. Your behavior has become intolerable." She moved closer, her tall frame looming over Emma. "What have you been doing up here? What are you hiding?" For a terrifying moment, Emma thought Mrs. Holloway would discover the strongbox. But the headmistress's attention was caught by something else, Lillian's journal, which Emma had carelessly left visible on top of one of the trunks. Mrs. Holloway snatched it up. "More evidence of your unhealthy obsession with that unfortunate girl." She flipped through the pages with a scowl. "This should have been turned over to the authorities. Instead, you've kept it for your own amusement." "It wasn't for amusement," Emma protested. "I just thought—" "You don't have the privilege of thinking in this institution, Miss Blackwood," Mrs. Holloway snapped. "You have the obligation to obey. A concept you seem unable to grasp." She closed the journal with a snap. 2 days in the isolation room should help clarify matters for you. Come along." The isolation room was a converted closet on the first floor, used to punish serious infractions. It contained nothing but a thin mattress on the floor and a chamber pot in the corner. The only light came from a small, high window that was too small to climb through, even for someone as slight as Emma. As Mrs. Holloway locked the door, Emma sank onto the mattress, her mind whirling. The strongbox remained hidden in the attic, but for how long? If Mrs. Holloway decided to search more thoroughly, she would surely find it, and the fortune that could be Emma's ticket to freedom would instead enrich the cruel headmistress. For 2 days, Emma was given only bread and water, delivered silently by Cook, whose eyes conveyed sympathy she dared not express in words. Emma used the time to plan. The county would be selling the orphanage soon. She needed to secure the strongbox and escape before that happened. But how? On the evening of the second day, as twilight deepened outside the small window, Emma heard a soft scraping at the door. Then, to her astonishment, it swung open to reveal Cook standing in the hallway, a finger pressed to her lips. Quickly, the old woman whispered, "Mrs. Holloway is meeting with the county officials in town. We don't have much time." Emma followed Cook through the darkened hallways and up the stairs. "How did you get the key?" she asked. "I've worked in this house for 40 years, child. I know where every key is kept." Cook led her not to the dormitory, but up to the attic. "No, where's it?" "Where's what?" Emma asked, genuinely confused. "Don't play games, girl. I saw your face when I found you in that office. You discovered something important enough to risk Mrs. Holloway's wrath." Cook's expression was kind but firm. "I'm not here to take it from you. I'm here to help you." After a moment's hesitation, Emma retrieved the strongbox from its hiding place. "It belonged to the judge," she explained, showing Cook the contents. "He was stealing from the county, and he left instructions for Lillian to claim it all legally after his death." Cook examined the letter, nodding slowly. "The poor man lost his mind after his wife and son died. The whole town knew it, but no one intervened. He was too powerful, too respected." She looked at Emma with newfound respect. "And now you've found his secret. What do you intend to do with it?" Emma hesitated. The honest answer, to take the money and run, seemed suddenly shameful in the face of Cook's kindness. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just want to get away from here to have a chance at a real life." "And so you shall," Cook said decisively. "But this fortune doesn't belong to you, child, no matter how much you might deserve it. It was stolen from the people of this county. She tapped the letter. However, there is a legal way forward. The judge's instructions mention a lawyer in Boston, Mr. Sullivan. We need to get you to him. But how? Mrs. Holloway would never let me leave. And the county officials will be relocating us soon. Cook smiled, a mischievous glint in her rheumy eyes. Leave that to me. For now, we need to hide this somewhere safer than the attic. And I know just the place. 3 days later, Emma stood in the kitchen garden at midnight, a small bundle of possessions clutched to her chest. The strong box had been resealed and hidden beneath a loose stone in the root cellar, a hiding place Cook assured her had concealed secrets since the days of the Underground Railroad. Cook had arranged everything with remarkable efficiency for a woman of her years. Her nephew, a freight train conductor on the Boston line, would be stopping at the Willow Creek station for a brief water refill at 12:30 a.m. He would take Emma as far as Worcester, where she would transfer to a passenger train to complete the journey to Boston. "Remember," Cook whispered as they hurried down the shadowy lane toward the station, "Mr. Sullivan's office is on State Street, near the Custom House. Show him the letter and explain about Lillian. A good man, Sullivan, he'll know what to do." Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Why are you helping me?" Cook's weathered face softened in the moonlight. "I've watched too many children pass through that orphanage, their spirits crushed by cruelty disguised as discipline. Besides," she added with a small smile, "I was there the day they brought Lillian home as a newborn. Beautiful child. I've carried the guilt of not speaking up when the judge began to change after his wife died. Perhaps this is my atonement." The station was deserted at this late hour, the small building locked and dark. They waited on the platform, listening for the approaching train. When its distant whistle sounded, Cook pressed an envelope into Emma's hand. "My life savings," she said firmly, cutting off Emma's protest. "Not much, but enough for food and perhaps a night's lodging if needed. The lawyer should help with the rest." The train appeared around the bend, its headlamp cutting through the night like a searching eye. As it slowed for the water tower, Cook's nephew leaned out from the brakeman's platform. "This her?" he called softly. Cook nodded, giving Emma a gentle push forward. "Godspeed, child. Write to me when you're settled." Emma was lifted aboard just as the train began to move again. She watched Cook's figure grow smaller on the platform until it disappeared into the darkness. Only then did she allow herself to cry, not from fear or sadness, but from a strange mixture of gratitude and hope she had not felt since before her parents' deaths. The journey to Worcester passed in a blur of rattling wheels and countryside glimpsed in moonlight. Cook's nephew, a taciturn man named Frank, asked no questions beyond confirming her name, but provided a relatively comfortable seat in the caboose and a warm blanket against the night chill. At Worcester, he escorted her to the passenger platform where the first Boston-bound train would depart at 6:15 a.m. Aunt Martha said to make sure. "You've got this ticket," he said, handing her a small envelope. "The train's usually half empty this early. Find a seat near a respectable-looking woman if you can." Emma followed his advice, boarding with the handful of early travelers and settling beside a gray-haired woman who was knitting what appeared to be a baby's bonnet. The woman gave her a curious glance but asked no questions, allowing Emma to doze fitfully as the train began its journey eastward. Boston, when they arrived 3 hours later, was overwhelming. Emma had never seen so many people, so many buildings, so much movement and noise. South Station teemed with travelers, porters, vendors, and officials. For a moment she stood frozen, unsure which way to turn. "Are you lost, dear?" asked the knitting woman, who had gathered her belongings and was preparing to disembark. "I need to find State Street," Emma said, "near the Custom House." The woman gave her an appraising look. "That's the financial district. Business with a bank, is it?" Or ... double quotes, she trailed off, perhaps noting Emma's worn clothing and solitary state. "A lawyer," Emma said. "Mr. Sullivan, it's about an inheritance." Something in her direct gaze must have satisfied the woman. "Well, then you'll need to take the streetcar. Come along, I'll show you which one by mid-morning." Emma stood before a imposing granite building with Sullivan and Associates, attorneys at law, engraved above the entrance. Gathering her courage, she pushed through the heavy door into a wood-paneled reception area where a clerk looked up from his ledger with undisguised surprise. "May I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone suggesting that a child alone was an unusual sight in these offices. "I need to see Mr. Sullivan," Emma said, striving for confidence. "It's regarding the estate of Judge Ezekiel Harrington." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Sullivan has been retired these past 2 years, miss. His son handles most of our cases now. However, ... double quotes, he hesitated, studying her with growing curiosity. The Harrington matter was one of Mr. Sullivan's most unusual cases. I believe he would want to be consulted." "Your name?" "Emma Blackwood. Please tell him it concerns Lillian Harrington." The clerk disappeared through a door, returning moments later with an elderly gentleman who peered at Emma through thick spectacles. "So," said the older Mr. Sullivan, "you have news of Lillian Harrington. A case I never expected to see resolved in my lifetime. Come into my office, Miss Blackwood, and tell me how a child your age comes to be involved in this affair." 3 months later, on a bright September morning, Emma stood on the steps of Boston's Suffolk County Courthouse, watching as a clerk posted the final legal notice regarding the Harrington estate settlement. The process had been lengthy and complex, involving county officials, courts in 2 jurisdictions, and hours of testimony, but it was finally complete. Judge Harrington's embezzled fortune had been returned to Willow Creek County, with interest. The revelation of his crimes and madness had created a sensation in legal circles, but public interest had eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals. Mr. Sullivan, who had taken on Emma's case with unexpected vigor despite his retirement, stood beside her on the courthouse steps. His white mustache twitched with satisfaction as he folded the final document into his briefcase. "Well, Miss Blackwood, your part in this extraordinary affair is officially concluded. You have done a service to justice and to the memory of poor Lillian." He placed a grandfatherly hand on her shoulder. "And now, as we discussed, your own future awaits." That future had taken shape during the long summer months. Upon hearing Emma's full story, confirmed by the documents found in the strongbox, Mr. Sullivan had been moved to offer her a place in his household. His daughter-in-law taught at a prestigious girls' school in Cambridge, and arrangements had been made for Emma to attend as a day student while living with the Sullivans as a ward of special circumstance. A designation Mr. Sullivan had apparently invented, but which no one dared question. "There's one more matter to attend to before we return home," Mr. Sullivan said, checking his pocket watch. "The train from Willow Creek should be arriving shortly." At South Station they waited as passengers disembarked from the Western Line. Among the last to appear was Cook, looking both uncomfortable and impressed in her best dress, a carpetbag clutched in her gnarled hands. "Martha," Emma cried, rushing forward to embrace the old woman. "Well, look at you," Cook said, holding Emma at arm's length. "Clean as a whistle and dressed like a proper Boston lady. The change suits you, mister." Sullivan stepped forward to make a formal greeting before escorting them to a waiting carriage. As they rode through the city streets, Cook shared news of Willow Creek. "The orphanage has been closed for good," she reported. "Mrs. Holloway has retired, though not by choice, from what I hear. The children have been placed in newer facilities in Springfield. And the old Harrington house... She hesitated, glancing at Emma. "What about it?" Emma asked. "They've torn it down. The county decided it had too many unhappy associations. They're building a proper school on the land instead." Cook smiled. "They're naming it after Lillian, the Lillian Harrington Memorial School. Seems fitting somehow." That evening, in the comfortable guest room of the Sullivan home, Emma sat at a small writing desk, composing a letter to Martha, who would be returning to Willow Creek the following day to take up a new position as head cook at the county hospital, considerable promotion from her orphanage duties. As she wrote, Emma felt a familiar cool breeze brush past her cheek. She looked up, half expecting to see Lillian's translucent form, but the room was empty. Yet the sensation of a presence remained peaceful, approving. Emma smiled and returned to her letter. Lillian's tragic story had ended with justice and remembrance, and through a strange twist of fate, it had given Emma the chance her parents would have wanted for her education. Opportunity, a future limited only by her own abilities and determination. Outside her window, the gaslights of Boston illuminated a world of possibilities she was only beginning to explore. Tomorrow would bring her first day of proper schooling, the beginning of a new chapter. But tonight, in the quiet of her room, Emma whispered a thank you to the orphan who had whispered to shadows. In the attic, the girl whose secret had changed everything. On her desk lay Lillian's journal, which Mr. Sullivan had successfully reclaimed from the evidence collected at Willow Creek. Emma had added a final entry in her own hand. "Justice comes to all in time, though sometimes it must be guided by unexpected hands. May you rest in peace, Lillian Harrington, knowing that your story has been told, your suffering acknowledged, and your memory honored. And may the shadows that once held you now release you into light." As Emma closed the journal, the cool breeze returned once more, then faded away completely. Like a final farewell from a friend now truly at rest,